My family called me greedy for asking about my dad's will. They said I couldn't even wait until after the funeral before asking about money. My brother called me selfish. My sister called me disgusting. I almost apologized. Then, our family lawyer reached under his desk, pulled out a second file, and looked directly at me. "Before we continue," he said, "there's something your father wanted you to know." What came next didn't just change my inheritance. It exposed the two people who had spent years stealing from the man they claimed to love. If you've ever had family turn against you over money, hit that like button. And if you want to see how this story ends, subscribe to Revenge Vaults, because sometimes the person everyone calls greedy is the only one brave enough to ask where the truth is hiding. My name is Gideon Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and until a few years ago, I thought I knew my family. I was wrong. My father, Walter Mercer, spent most of his life building a construction supply business from the ground up. He started with one rented warehouse in an old delivery truck. By the time I was born, he had 3 warehouses. By the time I was in high school, he had employees, contracts, and customers all over the county. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't even close. But he built something solid, something real, something that gave dozens of people steady jobs and allowed our family to live comfortably. Bennett, my older brother, was 4 years older than me. My sister, Marissa, was 2 years older. And then there was me, the youngest, the one who, according to Bennett, got away with everything. I never really understood that. I worked through college, paid for my own apartment, built my own career. I wasn't involved in Dad's company. That was important to me. I wanted to build something that belonged to me. So I took a job with a regional construction supply distributor and eventually became an operations manager. It wasn't glamorous. I spent plenty of mornings dealing with delayed shipments, angry contractors, broken forklifts, and employees calling in at the worst possible time. But I liked it. I knew what I was doing. I made my own money, and I didn't need my father's name to get ahead. Bennett, on the other hand, had a complicated relationship with Dad. He wanted Dad's approval, but he also wanted Dad's money. Those are two very different things. Bennett lived in another state. He had a nice house, a nice car, a wife who liked expensive vacations. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But Bennett had a habit. He spent money like it was coming back tomorrow. Then there was Marissa. She worked in marketing for a large company. She was smart, ambitious, and incredibly good at making people feel guilty when they disagreed with her. If Bennett was the one who made reckless decisions, Marissa was usually the person who found a way to explain why those decisions weren't really his fault. Growing up, I was closest to Dad. Not because he favored me, at least I never felt that way. I was just around more. When Dad needed help with something, I showed up. When he had knee surgery, I drove him to appointments. When his furnace broke during a snowstorm, I was the one sitting on his living room floor at midnight waiting for the repair company. When he couldn't figure out his new phone, I drove over and fixed it. Small things, nothing dramatic, just life. That's how Dad and I were. We didn't say much, we didn't hug often, but we understood each other. Then, about 18 months before he died, I noticed something changing. He started forgetting things. At first, it was little stuff. He'd ask me the same question twice. He'd forget where he'd put his keys. Once he called me by Bennett's name. He laughed it off. I didn't. I knew something was wrong. Eventually, the doctors found the problem. It wasn't something that could be fixed. Dad's health declined slowly. That was almost harder than if it had happened overnight. You had time to understand what was coming, and every day you knew there were fewer days left. So I started going over more. I'd bring groceries. I'd sit with him. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd sit in complete silence. One evening, about 3 months before he died, I found him sitting in his home office. There was a metal box on the desk.
It was old, scratched, the kind of box you might find in someone's garage. I had never seen it before. Dad was looking through a stack of papers. I knocked on the doorframe. "You okay?" He looked up. "Yeah." "You sure?" "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you've been staring at that same piece of paper for 5 minutes." He smiled. "Maybe it's interesting." I walked in. He closed the metal box. I noticed that. Not the papers, the box. He locked it. Then he put the key in his pocket. I laughed. "Okay." "What?" "Nothing." He looked at me. "You're getting nosy." "I'm your son. I'm allowed." "You're allowed to mind your business." I smiled. Then he became serious. "Gideon." "Yeah?" "If I leave you something complicated." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just answer the question." I thought about it. "I'd figure it out." He nodded. "That's what I thought." I smiled. "Is this about the company?" "No." "Your house?" "No." "Then what?" He looked toward the window. "Nothing." I knew he was hiding something, but I didn't push. That was Dad. When he didn't want to talk, you could push him for an hour and get absolutely nowhere. So I let it go. A few months later, Dad died. He was 71. He passed away early on a Sunday morning. I was there. Bennett wasn't. Maris wasn't.
I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and even though I'd known it was coming, I wasn't ready. Nobody is. The funeral was 4 days later. That's when everything started going wrong. At first, it seemed normal. People came, they hugged us, they brought food, they said things like, "He lived a good life." I nodded, I thanked them, I tried to survive the day. But Bennett and Maris were different. They weren't talking about Dad, they were talking about the estate. I heard Bennett asking someone about the house. Maris was discussing the business. They kept using words like assets and liabilities. I remember standing in the kitchen holding a paper plate I wasn't eating from. I just listened, and I thought, is this really what we're doing? Our father had been dead for 4 days, and they were already dividing up his life? I didn't say anything. Then, 3 days after the funeral, Bennett came to me. We were standing in Dad's driveway. He had his hands in his pockets. "So," he said. "So what?" "Have you heard anything from Dad's lawyer?" I shook my head. "No." "When are we meeting him?" "I don't know." Bennett looked irritated. "Well, somebody needs to find out." "I guess we'll hear from him." "That's it?" I looked at him. "What do you want me to say?" He shrugged. "I don't know." Then I asked the question that would change everything. "Do you know what Dad wanted done with the business?" Bennett stared at me. "What?" "The company." "Why?" "I was just asking." "Why are you asking?" I frowned. "Because it's Dad's company." "So?" "So I want to know what's going to happen." Bennett laughed, not a friendly laugh, a sharp one. "Oh, I get it." "What?" "Your share." I stared at him. "What?" "Your share." I felt my face getting hot. "I didn't say anything about money." "You don't have to." "Then why are you making this about money?" "Because that's why you're asking." "No, it isn't." Bennett stepped closer. "You couldn't even wait until the funeral was over before asking about Dad's assets." I froze. "That's not what I did." "Really?" "Really?" Maris walked out of the house. She must have heard us. "What happened?" Bennett looked at her. "Gideon wants to know what he's getting." I looked at Maris. "That's not what I said." "Oh, Gideon." There was something in her voice, that tone, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Turn Dad's death into a money conversation." "I didn't." "You just asked about the business." "Because I'm trying to understand what's happening." "Why?" I stared at her. "Because I'm his son." Bennett laughed. "Here we go." I felt something inside me snap. What the hell is that supposed to mean?
He shook his head. You always thought you were the good son. I took a step toward him. Watch it. Maris put her hand on Bennett. Stop. Then she looked at me. You need to calm down. I laughed. You're kidding. Gideon. No. My voice was shaking. I'm asking one question, and you're making it about yourself, Maris said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I haven't asked for anything. Bennett looked at me. You've always been greedy. That word hit harder than it should have. Greedy. I stared at him, then at Maris. She didn't defend me. That hurt even more. I asked, do you really think that? Maris looked away. That was my answer. I nodded. Okay. Then I walked away. I got into my truck. I drove home. In the entire way, I kept thinking about one thing. Maybe I shouldn't have asked. Maybe I had been insensitive. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was making my father's death about money. I felt ashamed. That night, I called Maris. She answered. Hey, did I upset you earlier? Silence. A little. I didn't mean to. I know. I wasn't asking for anything. I know. I just wanted to know what Dad wanted. Then why didn't you wait? I don't know. I sighed. I'm sorry. She didn't say anything. Then she said, just don't make this harder than it already is. I promised I wouldn't. That was the last apology I ever gave my family for asking a reasonable question. 2 weeks later, we met with Dad's attorney. His name was Harlan Pierce. He had represented my father for almost 20 years. He was in his 60s, quiet, careful, the kind of man who chose every word before he said it. We sat around a long conference table. Bennett sat on one side, Maris beside him. I sat across from them. Harlan opened a folder. Before we begin, he said, I want to remind everyone that this is a legal proceeding. Bennett nodded. Maris crossed her arms. I said nothing. Harlan began reading. The house went to Maris. A collection of investments was divided between Bennett and Maris. Some personal items were distributed. Then Harlan looked at me. Gideon, your father left you several personal accounts and a modest cash inheritance. I nodded. It wasn't a huge amount, but it didn't matter. I hadn't expected anything. Then Harlan continued, the remainder of the estate will be handled according to the instructions in the trust. Bennett leaned back. He looked satisfied. Maris smiled. I felt relieved, not because of the money, because it was finally over. Then Harlan stopped. He closed the first folder. Bennett frowned. Is that it? Harlan looked at him. No. What else? Harlan didn't answer immediately. He turned toward a cabinet behind him. He stood, walked over, opened the cabinet, then reached inside. He pulled out a thick brown file. I looked at it. There was no label. Bennett sat up. What is that? Harlan returned to his seat. He placed the file on the table. This is a supplemental estate file.
Maris frowned. What does that mean? It means your father instructed me to open it only after the primary will had been read. Bennett stared at him. Why? Your father didn't explain. Then what is it? Harlan looked at me, then at Bennett, then at Maris. His instructions were very specific. Bennett's voice became sharp. About what? Harlan placed his hand on the file. About the order in which I was supposed to handle this. I felt my heart start beating faster. Why? Harlan looked at me directly. Because your father anticipated that there might be conflict. Bennett laughed. Conflict? Maris looked nervous. I didn't say anything. Harlan opened the file. The first thing inside was a handwritten letter. He looked at me. Gideon, do you recognize your father's handwriting? I nodded. Yes. Harlan removed the letter. He unfolded it. Then he began to read. If my children are sitting together when this letter is opened, then I have probably been gone for some time. My chest tightened. Harlan continued. I hope I am wrong about what I am about to say. Bennett shifted in his chair. Maris looked at him. The room became completely silent. Harlan read the next line. I have spent most of my life trying to teach my children that family is more important than money. He paused, then continued. But money has a way of revealing what people truly value. I looked down. I didn't know why. Maybe because I already knew where this was going. Harlan reached for another document. This letter refers to several financial records. Bennett immediately said, What records? Harlan looked at him.
I'll get to that. Bennett leaned forward. No, what records? Harlan's voice became firm. Mr. Mercer, please let me finish. Bennett leaned back. Harlan continued. Over the last 2 years of my life, I became aware of unexplained withdrawals from my company. My head lifted. Bennett's face changed, just slightly, but I saw it. Harlan continued. At first, I believed these were accounting errors. He placed a document on the table. Then I hired an outside accountant. Bennett looked at the paper. I looked at Bennett. He was staring at the table. Harlan said, "The investigation found a pattern." Maris shifted in her chair. "What pattern?" she asked. Harlan looked at her. Money was being transferred from company accounts into several accounts that were not authorized by your father. Bennett stood up. "That's ridiculous." Harlan didn't react. "Sit down, Bennett," Maris said. "No." Bennett pointed at the lawyer. "This is insane." Harlan looked at him. "Sit down." Something in Harlan's voice made Bennett hesitate. Then he sat. I looked at the documents. "Who took the money?" Nobody answered. I looked at Harlan. He said, "Your father believed it was Bennett." I looked at my brother. "What?" Bennett stood again. "That's a lie." Harlan said nothing. Bennett turned toward me. "You're believing this?" "I'm not believing anything." "Of course you are." "Just sit down." Bennett's face turned red.
"You always wanted this." "What?" "Dad's company." I stared at him. "I never wanted your company. You were always around him because I helped him." "Exactly." I couldn't believe it. "You think I was helping Dad because I wanted his money?" Bennett didn't answer. I looked at Harlan. "Did Dad accuse him?" Harlan nodded. "Your father confronted Bennett." Bennett's jaw tightened. "He misunderstood." "What did he misunderstand?" Bennett looked at me. "He misunderstood the transfers." "How?" "I borrowed money." I stared at him. "From Dad?" "Yes." "How much?" He looked away. "That's not important." Harlan placed another document on the table. Bennett's face went pale. I looked down. The number was there. I won't say the exact amount, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. It wasn't a small loan. It was years of withdrawals. I looked at Bennett. "You took all that?" "I was going to pay it back." "With what?" He shouted. "I said I was going to pay it back." I flinched. The room went silent. I looked at him. "Did Dad know?" "Yes." "And he forgave you?" Bennett didn't answer. Harlan said, "Your father gave him an opportunity to repay the money." Bennett looked at Harlan. "Don't," Harlan continued. "He did not." Bennett slammed his hand against the table. "Stop!" Maris stood up. "Bennett." He turned toward her. "What?" "Sit down." "You too?" Maris stared at him. "Just sit down." Bennett sat. I looked at Maris. Then I saw something. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't surprised. She already knew. I whispered, "You knew." Maris looked at me. "What?" "You knew." "No, don't lie to me." "Gideon, you knew." She looked at Bennett, then back at me. "I knew he was having financial problems. That's not what I asked." She said nothing. I stood up. "You knew he was taking money from Dad." Bennett shouted, "Don't put this on her." I turned toward him. "Why are you defending her?" "Because she didn't do anything." Harlan quietly opened another document. Then he said, "Actually," everyone stopped. Harlan looked at Maris. "Your father believed she did." Maris froze. I stared at her. "What does that mean?" Harlan picked up a bank statement. "Your father discovered that several payments from the company were made to a consulting firm." Maris shook her head. "No, that firm was connected to your husband's business." "No." "Maris, no." She stood up. "This is wrong." Harlan continued. "Your father believed you authorized the transfers." Maris looked at me. "I didn't steal anything." "Then explain it." "I was helping." I laughed. "You were helping?" "My husband's company was struggling, so you took money from Dad?" "I borrowed it." "Like Bennett?" She looked away. I couldn't believe this. My entire family had spent weeks calling me greedy, and they had been stealing from the man they were mourning. I felt something inside me break. I looked at Harlan. Why didn't Dad tell me? Harlan was silent. Then he handed me the letter. He did.
I looked down. The next line was written by my father's handwriting. Harlan said, "Your father specifically mentioned you." My hands started shaking. I looked up. What did he say? Harlan read, "If Gideon asks what I left behind, do not let anyone shame him for asking." My breath caught. Harlan continued, "He has earned the right to know." I couldn't speak. Bennett stared at me. Maris looked down. I felt tears forming. Not because of the money, because Dad knew. He knew they would do this. He knew they would call me greedy. He knew they would make me feel guilty for asking a question. And somehow he had prepared for it. I whispered, "He knew." Harlan nodded. "Yes." I wiped my face. Then Harlan reached into the file again. "There is more." Bennett immediately said, "More?" Harlan looked at him. "Yes." He pulled out a set of property documents. I looked at them. "What is that?" Harlan said, "Your father owned a controlling interest in a commercial property company." I frowned. "What company?" He told me. I had never heard of it. Bennett stood. "That's impossible." Harlan looked at him. "Your father acquired the properties over many years." Maris stared at the documents. "Why wasn't this in the will?" "Because it wasn't part of the primary estate." "Then who owns it?" Harlan looked at me. I felt my heart drop. "No." "Gideon?" "No." "What?" "Don't." Harlan said, "Your father transferred controlling ownership to you." The room exploded. Bennett shouted, "What?" Maris stood. "That's not fair." I looked at them. "I didn't know." "You knew it," Bennett screamed. "I didn't. You were always with him, because he was my father." Bennett moved toward me. "You manipulated him." I stepped back. "Don't come near me. You wanted this. I didn't even know it existed. You expect me to believe that?" "Yes." He kept coming. I felt my anger rising. "Back off!" Bennett shoved me. I stumbled backward. The chair hit the wall. I stared at him. He looked angry. I was furious. I stepped forward. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Bennett raised his hand, and then, slap. The sound echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Maris had slapped him. Bennett slowly turned his head. She was crying. "Enough!" Bennett stared at her. "What did you do?" Maris was shaking. "I said enough!" Bennett touched his cheek. "You hit me?" "Yes." "You actually hit me?" "You were going to hit him." Bennett looked at me, then at her. Maris finally broke. "I can't do this anymore." Bennett whispered, "Maris, no." She wiped her face. "No more lies." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She looked at me. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. "Dad knew everything." I froze. "What?" "He knew about the money." "What money?" "The money Bennett took." "Stop!" Bennett shouted. Maris ignored him. "He knew about the money I borrowed." "Maris, he knew we were both in trouble." Bennett grabbed her arm. She pulled away. "Don't touch me." Harlan stood. "Mr. Mercer, step away from your sister." Bennett backed away. I looked at Maris. "Why did you call me greedy?" She started crying. "I didn't want you asking questions." I felt my stomach drop. "What?" She shook her head. "If you asked questions, we knew the attorney would start looking. So you called me greedy?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was easier." I laughed. A terrible, bitter laugh. "It was easier to make me feel ashamed?" She nodded. I couldn't believe it. "You knew I was trying to understand what Dad wanted." "Yes." "And you made me think I was a terrible son."
I'm sorry. No, I shook my head. You don't get to say that. Gideon, no. My voice cracked. You let me go home thinking I was selfish. She was crying. You let me apologize to you. I know. You knew the entire time? Yes. I turned away. I couldn't look at her. Harland quietly gathered the documents. Then he said, "There's one more condition." I turned. What? The property company. What about it? Your father placed conditions on your inheritance. I looked at him. What kind? Before you can take full control, an independent audit must be completed. I frowned. Why? Because your father wanted every financial transaction involving the family business reviewed. I looked at Bennett. His face went white. Harlan continued, "If the audit finds evidence of misconduct, you are authorized to pursue recovery through legal channels." Bennett shook his head. "No." I looked at him. "No? You can't do this. I didn't do anything. You can stop the audit." "Why?" "Because we're family." I stared at him. The irony was almost too much. I said, "You didn't remember that when you called me greedy." Bennett looked down. "That was different." "No," I shook my head. "It wasn't." Harland looked at me. "Mr. Mercer, the decision is yours." I looked at the papers, then at Bennett, then at Maris. For years, I had helped my family. I had protected them. I had kept their secrets. I had forgiven them. And what had it gotten me? The moment I asked one question, they turned on me. So I made my decision. Do the audit. Bennett's head snapped up. "What?" "Do it." "You can't." "I can." "Gideon, please." I looked at Maris. "Don't ask me to protect you." She started crying. "I'm not." "Good." I looked at Harland. "Do the audit." And that was the moment everything changed. The audit took 4 months. 4 months of records. Bank statements, invoices, contracts, emails, transfers. Every financial decision my father had made in the last several years was examined, and the deeper they went, the worse it became. Bennett hadn't just taken money, he had moved company funds into his personal accounts. He had used the money to cover personal expenses. He had bought a new vehicle.
Paid credit card bills, covered debts. Maris had authorized transfers to her husband's business. Some of that money had been repaid, some hadn't. But there was more. They had both hidden financial information from my father. They had both lied, and they had both tried to make me feel guilty for asking questions. The audit confirmed everything. I remember sitting in Harlan's office when he gave me the final report. I looked at it, then I closed the folder. "What happens now?" Harlan said, "That's up to you." "Can they go to jail?" "That's not something I can answer." "Can I sue them?" "Yes." "Should I?" Harlan paused. "That's your decision." I thought about it. I could have destroyed them. I had the evidence. I had the authority. I had the resources. But I didn't want revenge that way. I wanted accountability. There was a difference. I said, "Recover the money." Harlan nodded. "And the rest?" "Restructure the company." "What about Bennett?" "Remove him." "And Maris?" I thought about it. "She pays back what she owes." Harlan nodded. "Understood." That was it. No screaming, no dramatic courtroom scene, no revenge speech, just consequences, real ones. Bennett had to sell his second home. He had to liquidate investments. His lifestyle changed overnight. Maris and her husband sold their business. They paid back what they could. It took years, but they did. The family company was restructured. Bennett lost his position. Maris stepped away completely, and I took control of the property company Dad had left me. At first, I didn't want it. I didn't feel like I had earned it. But then I remembered Dad's question, if I leave something complicated. He knew. He had known this would be complicated. The property company wasn't a reward, it was a responsibility. The people working there had nothing to do with my family's mistakes, so I protected them. I kept the employees, I kept the properties, I rebuilt the financial system. I hired an independent accounting firm.
No family member had access to company money without oversight. I made sure no one could ever repeat what happened. And slowly, the company grew. 2 years passed, then 3. In one afternoon, Bennett showed up at my office. I hadn't seen him in almost a year. My assistant told me he was waiting. I almost said no, but I told her to send him in. Bennett walked through the door. He looked different, older, tired. He sat down. I waited. He stared at me. Then he said, "You took everything from me." I leaned back. "No." He frowned. "Yes, you did." "I didn't take anything. You took Dad's company." His face tightened. "That's not the same thing." "It is. I was going to pay it back. You didn't." "I would have, but you didn't." He looked away. I continued. "You lost what you lost because you took what wasn't yours."
He stared at me. "You think you're better than me?" "No." "Then why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Acting like you're some kind of saint." I almost laughed. "I'm not a saint." "Then what are you?" I thought about it. "I'm the guy you called greedy." He stared at me. I smiled. "Remember?" He looked down. I said, "You called me greedy because I asked what Dad wanted." Silence. "You told me I was disgusting." Nothing. "You made me feel guilty for asking one question." He swallowed. "And now you're sitting in my office asking me for help." His eyes lifted. I hadn't realized that's why he came. "Help with what?" He hesitated. "My business." I stared at him. "What about it?" "I need a loan." I almost laughed. "No." His face fell. "Why?" "Because I'm not your bank. I'm family." I shook my head. "That's not enough. Please." I stood up. "You know what I learned?" He looked at me. "Family isn't the people who share your last name." I walked toward the window. "Family is the people who don't make you feel ashamed for asking questions." He didn't say anything. I turned around. "You don't need my money." "Yes, I do." "No." I pointed toward the door. "You need to live with your decisions." His face turned red. "You've become so selfish." I smiled. "No." I opened the door. "I've become careful." He stared at me. Then he walked out. I watched him leave, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. A year later, I visited Dad's old office. It had been renovated. The walls were repainted, the furniture was updated. But I kept his desk. I sat behind it, the same desk where he had once looked at me and asked if I could handle something complicated. I opened the drawer. Inside was the old metal box, the one I had seen months before he died. I had forgotten about it. I pulled it out. The key was in the second file. I unlocked it. There wasn't much. A few photographs, an old watch, some handwritten notes, and one final envelope. My name was on it. Gideon. I opened it. There was only one page. My father's handwriting. I read it slowly. "Dear Gideon, if you're reading this, then things probably didn't go the way I hoped. I'm sorry. I wish I could have told you everything myself, but I knew you. You would have tried to fix it. You would have protected everyone, even the people who didn't deserve it. That's why I left this responsibility to you, not because I love you more, not because you deserve more, but because I trust you to understand the difference between forgiveness and permission. Forgive people if you can, but don't give them permission to hurt you again. And remember, a family business is not a trophy. It is a responsibility. Take care of the people who depend on it. That's what matters."
Love, Dad. I sat there for a long time. I couldn't move. Then I started crying. Not the kind of crying you do at a funeral. This was different. It was quieter.
It was the kind that comes when you finally understand something you've been trying to understand for years. Dad hadn't left me the company because he thought I was better than Bennett. He hadn't left it to me because he wanted to punish my siblings. He left it to me because he trusted me. And suddenly, the second file made sense. He knew Bennett and Maris would fight. He knew they might call me greedy. He knew they might try to make me feel guilty. So he left behind the one thing they couldn't argue with: the truth. I still think about that day sometimes, the day my family called me greedy. I remember sitting in that conference room, feeling embarrassed, feeling ashamed, thinking maybe I had done something wrong. But I hadn't. I had asked a question, that's all. And the people who wanted me to feel guilty for asking it were the people who had the most to hide. Bennett eventually moved away. Maris and I speak occasionally. We're not close. Maybe we never will be. Some things can't be undone. Some apologies come too late. But I don't hate them. I don't need to, because I learned something from Dad. Revenge isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes revenge is refusing to protect them from the consequences of their own choices. Sometimes it's letting the truth speak for itself. And sometimes the best revenge is building something so strong that the people who tried to take advantage of you eventually have to watch you protect the very thing they almost destroyed. 3 years after Dad died, the property company was worth more than it had been when he was alive. The employees were still there. The business was stable. The legacy survived. And one morning, I stood outside one of the warehouses Dad had bought decades earlier. I watched a delivery truck pull into the lot. A man in his 60s stepped out. He was one of Dad's original employees. He walked over to me. "You'd be proud," he said. I smiled. "I hope so." He looked at the building. "Your dad always said you'd take care of this place." I looked at him. "He said that?" "All the time." I swallowed. I didn't know that. I looked up at the building, and for a moment, I could almost hear Dad's voice. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." But this time, it was my turn. I had finally understood what he meant. He hadn't been asking me to take care of a business. He had been asking me to take care of a legacy. And I did. My family thought I was greedy because I asked what my father had left behind. They thought I wanted his money.
They thought I wanted his company. They thought I wanted everything. They were wrong. I didn't want everything. I wanted the truth. And when Harland opened that second file, the truth was exactly what I got. The people who called me greedy lost control of the legacy they had spent years trying to exploit. The people who accused me of wanting too much had been secretly taking too much themselves. And the person they tried to shame into silence ended up becoming the person my father trusted to protect everything he had built. That was my revenge. I didn't destroy my family. I didn't humiliate them. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I simply stopped covering for them. And sometimes that's enough. Because karma doesn't always arrive with a dramatic courtroom verdict. Sometimes karma looks like a quiet office, a closed door, a business that survives, and a person who finally realizes the thing they thought they had lost was actually the thing that saved them.
If this story made you think about someone who ever called you selfish for asking the right questions, hit the like button and share this video with someone who understands that family should never be an excuse for betrayal. And if you want more stories about hidden wills, family betrayal, revenge, and the kind of karma nobody sees coming, subscribe to Revenge Vaults, because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. Sometimes it's the truth someone trusted you to protect.